So hello and welcome everybody to our webinar on nonconformities. My name is Robert Crosby and I've been working for Citation ISO certification for just over 5 years now. I specialise in many standards, but predominantly looking at ISO 9001 for quality, ISO 14001 for the environment, ISO 45001 health and safety, and I also do information security 27001, amongst other standards. But they're the key ones that I tend to get involved with on a day-to-day basis. If anybody does happen to have any questions as we progress through the webinar, please feel free to ask them. You can actually ask them in the chat box on the right-hand side of your web browser, I think, on there. Feel free to ask any questions as we go through. I may naturally answer some of these questions as I'm presenting anyway, but again, we will be holding a Q&A at the back end of the webinar to allow everybody to ask any questions, whether no matter how big, how small. We love those questions coming in. We obviously like to help people, and we often find that the Q&A sessions, the attendees get a lot of value from it. So again, don't be afraid to ask the questions. I'm here to help. Right. So nonconformities, identify and rectify best practice explained. So today, what we're going to be covering is nonconformances. We're going to be covering what a nonconformance is, why you should spot them, the advantages of spotting them, the different types of nonconformity that may exist that you may be raising. We will also touch on the different grades of nonconformity. We'll actually be going into a small level of detail about a nonconformity, and we can show you how that's actually structured when you're writing it up. We'll also be looking at corrective and preventative action. What measures are people putting in place to satisfy that nonconformance? Problem-solving methods, so root cause analysis, and then reviewing corrective action. And as I said earlier, there will be a Q&A towards the end of the webinar. So what is a nonconformance? So a nonconformance, when we're thinking about the ISO standards, if you're already implementing ISO standards, or if you're at the start of the journey, or you may have already implemented an ISO and you're on this webinar just to broaden the knowledge that you've got. Essentially, a nonconformance is identifying a failure within the system that you've got. That might be a failure, i.e. not meeting the requirements of the standard, or it may be an operational failure where whatever outcomes are happening within your organization, it's not an expected outcome and you want to correct it. There may be a faulty process, or a faulty manufacturing process, or a faulty office process where people aren't following the necessary method of doing things, and that may lead to product deficiencies, service delivery deficiencies, and it also ultimately might result in a customer complaint. Generally, as we go through the webinar, you will see that nonconformance is there to identify the things that are going wrong, the things that aren't working correctly. It may be that your documents aren't documenting your processes correctly. It might just be identifying that things have moved on and you're reviewing your own processes, and the way that we did things 3 years ago is not the same as we're doing things now. So essentially, by analysing your management system and by identifying the shortfalls, the things that are going wrong, at least it's giving you and your organisation an opportunity to actually delve into what the problem is and hopefully rectify it. Now, when as an auditor and a consultant, if I'm attending client sites and I'm undertaking an audit, for example, when a nonconformity is discussed, some people think that there's a stigma attached to nonconformances, and it really isn't that at all. Essentially, what I do encourage my clients is it's about spotting what can go wrong and not being afraid to actually say, look, we need to improve this. You know, we've spotted it going wrong. We don't want it to happen again. And the nonconformance reporting systems that you may or may not have in place at the moment, they should help you to identify the problem, understand what's going on, and hopefully rectify it to prevent it from happening further down the line. And I think that's really part of the continuous improvement aspect of any management system. By rectifying our faults and making sure that they're not happening again, it allows you and your organization the time to do other things in the organization. So, for example, bring more customers on board, spend more time with marketing, developing new products. Because essentially what you're not doing is you're not continually firefighting and addressing repeat non-conformances. So when we look at a non-conformance, some of the things some examples that you may consider in with your management systems and identifying a non-conformance. Basically, are you meeting the requirements of an ISO standard? Different ISO standards have different requirements. There is a lot of commonality between ISO standards, but there are also some unique elements. So it's really identifying what is working for you, what's not working for you, and is it matching what we expect to happen within the organization? And of course, is it meeting the standard? Was there a service delivery problem? Was there a product manufacture problem? Was there a faulty product that was sent out to the customer? Essentially, your non-conformities should help to identify them. And hopefully, if you do have a non-conformance, it may be that you actually spot some of these errors before that product is delivered, that product or service is delivered to any of your clients. Hence, you don't actually get a customer complaint, but you may still have a non-conformance that supports the fact that you've created the improvement to prevent that customer from not getting the product that they want. Did the customer complain? So that's quite a useful feature. You could, as an organization, you could actually look at the interactions between your organizations and your customers and actually analyze how many customer complaints you've had over a certain period. That might be an indicator that whether you're getting things really good, whether things are working for you, or it may be that a particular area of your business is not performing as expected and you are getting quite a lot of complaints for that particular product or service. And again, the non-conformance system will help you to hone in on those issues and hopefully rectify them. Why raise a non-conformity? So an interesting question. It's really about improvement. It's really about your organization and its people not necessarily spending excessive amounts of time in correcting issues and then finding out that actually this is a repeat issue. We dealt with it last week. Unfortunately, we've got the same issue again. Every time that you have to action something and investigate something, essentially it's gonna take a bit of time to do. And the more that you can prevent things from happening, it's going to, as I said earlier, it's going to allow you to push your business forward. Spotting failures, spotting shortfalls, and identifying non-conformances will help your organization to improve what they do. It might even be that fundamentally you have to totally review from start to finish a certain process in order to make it more efficient. Well, again, by looking at any non-conformances, looking at the evidence that you may have raised, looking at customer complaints, that might actually identify how you can get it right. And you can work with your customers to ensure that the necessary actions are being carried out. I think an interesting issue is how big and small, how big of an issue do we actually investigate? How small of an issue? What's the limit? Well, essentially, if you've got a big, what I call a red flag. So, for example, if there's an area of the business that continually has accidents, for example, it could be that the equipment's not correct, or it could be the working environment needs to be updated. Now, slip-ups and shortfalls might be that somebody's not necessarily using the latest version of a document that should be used. So, for example, an induction checklist is a good example of this. If I'm inducting employees and I'm using an out-of-date induction checklist, it may be that I'm not actually capturing the required information that my HR team want me to capture. So again, it might be a slip-up. It might be the fact that that document's being printed out and put on a desk and we're taking from a pile of documents. So I think if it's a slip-up, what we're aiming to do is correct that example. So in this case, what we'd do is we'd print off perhaps the right document and we'd put that on the desk. Or we may even say, well, actually, we're not going to print off any documents. What we're going to do is we're going to set up a specialized folder on our server or on our OneDrive or SharePoint, for example, and people need to go to that folder there to get the document. So it may be a slip up that doesn't necessarily cause a massive hiccup at that point, and you've already spotted it, which essentially you're starting to improve your business. I think even the smallest of issues, if you are recording these small issues and big, medium issues, if you're recording them all, what it allows your organization to do is look at everything that's affecting your business. What is repeating itself? Why is it repeating itself? What are we doing to prevent that from repeating itself? Essentially, what we're looking at there is we're looking to make things a little bit less serious in terms of impact on the organization. Now, there's an interesting quote there from an organization called Sintra about non-conformances, and it states that they monitor and improve their service delivery activities in a standardized, measured and repeatable way. And when their expectations, when their service delivery expectations fall short, or they do get customer complaints, they're in a position there where they can investigate those, and they've got a method for following that through to completion. Hopefully, again, trying to get things right so it prevents us from doing extra work. I think one of the interesting analogies that I've used before is if we think of an ant. So you might spot an ant outside your conservatory or in your kitchen, for example. Now, in itself, an ant on its own is not a massive, you wouldn't think it was a massive issue. So you may obviously deal with that ant, and then you may spot another ant. Now, if that you don't clean the ant up or you don't deal with it, it may be that the next day there's 10 ants, and then the day after there's 20 ants. So essentially that little thing can actually compound itself over a period of time, and before you know it, you've got an ant infestation. So that the purpose of the non-conformances, it's not just to get rid of ant infestations, it's to deal with the things at root cause. So we'll just look at some examples that you yourself may have encountered in your own organization, or you may be starting out your journey of implementing ISOs, and this may give you some general ideas of where a non-conformance can actually be raised. And these can be found quite common both in sort of office industries and also like manufacturing industries alike. So customer complaints. Generally, if we've got low numbers of customer complaints, there might be very little work to do, but each customer complaint needs to be taken on its own merit. Some might be more serious than others. So that might essentially lead to an investigation process whereby you analyze your process and think there are some shortfalls. We're not doing everything that we need to do before that product or service goes to the client. So again, that might be a source of non-conformance. Expired training records. We need to keep his training up to date, and although at times training records may expire, you may actually notice it, and you may think, well, actually, we know that it's expired, so we're going to get Robert on a training course, a health and safety first aid at work course. We'll book that in, and essentially that's a corrective action. I mean, I think it's quite important to have up-to-date training records, and also training records that reflect what your organisation staff are expected to do. Faulty manufacturing. I mean, there can be many examples of this. There might be faulty manufacturing machinery. There might be unsafe working environment. There might be unsafe acts that people are carrying out and they're getting left unchecked. There might be a range of unsafe acts that employees are carrying out because nobody's had a word with them, essentially, and raised it as a point. They might feel as though that this is the working practice. I think most people understand the general concepts of health and safety and what's safe and what's not safe. So essentially, if you see something while you're in your offices, on the shop floor, in your manufacturing environments, production environments, and it looks unsafe, speak to your health and safety advisor or your health and safety representative. It might be that you have to raise a non-conformance on your health and safety management system because people aren't following the correct procedures. Equipment out of date calibration, particularly crucial for the quality management systems. Calibrated equipment usually deals with monitoring and measurement of devices. So, for example, if you have weighing scales, verniers, you may do your own occupational health dust screening for your working environment. It's important that those devices are up to date and calibrated, because if you take readings and it's not calibrated, well, essentially it could cause a problem because it's actually giving incorrect readings. One thing that I used to get involved with was breath testing for drivers. And it was important that breath testing machine, very much like the police use, that has to be calibrated every 6 months. So in essence, we always had to have a calibrated device available in case we needed to do breath testing, which essentially over a period of time, we realized we needed 2 breath testers, so that whilst one was sent away being calibrated, we actually had one in service that we could use. So again, if there is a period of time where you're sending that away for calibration and somebody needs to be breath tested and you haven't got one, that could essentially be a non-conformance. Management reviews not being carried out. So one of the key criteria of any ISO is generally you are obligated to undertake management reviews. So that's a performance appraisal on how well you think your management system's holding up. Have you had any non-conformances? Have you carried out all of your internal procedure reviews? Is the training up to date? The management system review is essentially, it's that performance appraisal. And if you're not carrying it out, you're not only not meeting the requirements of the standard, you're actually losing out on the opportunity to improve your business. And you're losing out on the opportunity to feed back to management what's actually going on within the business in terms of your management system. Very, very similar, missed internal audits. It's the same principle as management review. You will need to spot check your system. And that might be done throughout the year. It might be done in one, over a couple of days. It might even be done in one day. I mean, essentially, it is a requirement of the standard. And the purpose of that is so that the organization is continually looking at their business processes and actually checking what's going on, what their expectations are of that organization, and are people meeting those expectations. And the internal audits are a brilliant way to check to see whether those management systems are working. It's almost like a check that we carry out as a certification body when we come in to audit you. So you will have your own internal audits, but we'll also come in and check that you're doing everything that's needed to be done as an external auditor. Undocumented or unachievable objectives. Most management system standards require objectives to be documented. And to a certain extent, they also need to be aligned with any risks and opportunities in the organization. So if your organization doesn't document them and they're in people's heads, not only are you losing out the chance to share and communicate those objectives so that everybody gives a shared drive towards delivering those objectives, but you're also not meeting one of the requirements of the standards. You may have your own internal processes that talk about objectives. Again, if you are not documenting them and you're not appraising them, reviewing them, effectively you're missing out on what's required from the standard. Plus, as I say, you're missing out on the chance to drive your business forward. And no evaluation of risk. Different standards have different ways of evaluating risks. Example, the environmental standard looks at your environmental aspects and impacts. The health and safety standard looks at your occupational health and safety risks. The 27001 standard for information security looks at your information asset risks. I mean, essentially, it's all about that keyword there, risk. Have we identified what can impact our business? Have we put measures in to mitigate any errors, even to mitigate the level of risk? The more control that you have and the more understanding of risk will allow you to plan to do things, and also to plan to do things to get things correctly. And hopefully, if people are following them and you're monitoring those risks and people are following those methods and procedures, essentially that should help to lower the overall element of risk. The severity may stay the same, but the more control you have, the likelihood of something happen will reduce, which ultimately reduces your overall level of risk. So, an interesting question that we sometimes get for people who are just engaging in their journey of ISOs is the different types of non-conformances that may exist. Now, I've given you some examples of some non-conformances, but when as an internal auditor or even as an external auditor, i.e. me coming in and looking at your business, there are 2 levels of non-conformances. So a minor non-conformance is essentially, it's a shortfall that doesn't necessarily cause a collapse in your procedures or your systems. It's something's just gone wrong that's easy to manage, and effectively we can correct it sort of quite quickly. It doesn't have a necessary major impact on your business. It's a slip up, but we've spotted it, we've identified it. Internal audits often find minor non-conformances. It's people aren't necessarily following what they should be doing, or people aren't meeting the requirements of your internal process. So as I say, it might be that just as a low level issue, we can actually look at that issue, we can understand quite quickly what's gone wrong, we can put in measures to correct it. Brilliant. Minor non-conformance can be quickly usually turned around in a quite quick time frame. Now, a major non-conformance can also be turned around in a quite quick time frame, but generally what a major non-conformance is indicating is a breakdown in your system. So when you're thinking about not doing internal audits, if you've not done your internal audits or you've not done your management review, essentially they're some of the key requirements of that particular standard that you're working with. And as I say, that exists over all of the standards that I've talked about so far. So if you're not doing that, you're not meeting the requirements, you're losing out that opportunity to check. Hence why we would raise a major non-conformance. It might be that, for example, you've had an accident and the accident's caused a RIDDOR. So effectively, you've got to communicate that accident because somebody's had some time off, and that's gone to the HSE. Now, it might be that the reason why that accident's happened is because actually somebody's not followed a procedure. It might be not the business's fault. It might be because an employee's acted under their own volition and they've not followed that procedure, and that accident's happened to themselves. So you essentially can confirm when you've investigated whether it would be a major non-conformance or not. I think other things, if we're thinking about the environmental standard, if organisations are not aware of their legal obligations and they're not aware of for example, that legislation changes and the following outdated rules, it could be that somebody spots it and raises it as a major non-conformance, because generally when we think about legislation, it means that there's a potential there that you could be summoned to court for a particular issue. Or you could have, for example, a visit from the HSE or even the Environmental Agency. So what we're doing is when we're raising major non-conformances, we're really saying to our organisation, our management team, look, we need to look at this. This could significantly affect our business. It could affect our reputation over the long term. We need to get on this. We need to create action, and we just need to get it on our radar and make sure that we're dealing with it. So again, major is a significant failure, whereas minors might be easy to deal with, but they don't have a lasting or a huge impact, and it's one that we can probably easily solve. Just bear with me a moment, please. Here we go. So spotting a non-conformance. We've already covered some examples about a non-conformance. In principle, non-conformances can usually be spotted, certainly when you're internally auditing your system. So somebody is effectively looking at various parts of the business. It might be the purchasing process. It might be how you carry out training. While you're internally auditing those processes, or again, when we come in from an external point of view and auditing, we may spot things and we may have a conversation with you and we may explore the evidence that sits behind the issue that we can potentially see. And by looking at certain bits of documents, certain bits of evidence, having conversations, we might be able to establish whether it needs to be raised as a non-conformance. We could clearly say you're not meeting the standards of the requirements of the standard. It becomes a non-conformance. You yourselves may be just walking around the office or the production environment, shop floor, and you might spot something that's not really being done how it should be doing. There might be a door hanging off and it's a fire door, for example. So you can operationally, you can actually spot these non-conformances and feed that in to the person that's looking after the management system. And I think, again, if you're looking to start the journey of management systems, it's worth obviously having a team more than anything else. And if you're only a small business, then it might only be a few key people in the business that's looking at this. But it's all about communication, really. It's about feeding back where we see a potential problem. You know, nobody gets told off for raising a point, and it might be, for example, I might raise a point to my manager, and it might be because I don't fully understand the situation, and my manager might turn around to me and say, well spotted, however, it's not a lasting impact. We are on with this in the background. There's just a few elements that you don't know about that I do, and fair enough, it is what it is. At least I'm giving my organisation and my management team the opportunity to identify possible things that may go wrong. You may see poor communication within the organisation. You may spot inaccurate or missing documentation. A good one for this one is purchase orders. Purchase orders generally need to be approved and signed off. And if, for example, purchase orders are going through the business and nobody's approving and signing it off, it could be that the organisation is hemorrhaging money because people are spending unnecessarily, or they might be bringing in materials that, stocks of materials that it's not warranted. We might have big projects that only require a small amount of components. And if you order in, massive amounts of components and people are ordering in willy-nilly without any authorization, that might be something that you may spot. There might be training issues. People having accidents. I'd always look at your procedures and see whether those are effective. So it might actually be that we're not training out our procedures, even though that we've got them. Brilliant. That could be a non-conformance. Motivational problems. There may be motivational problems with the staff, and it might be, for example, that the working environment's not where it should be and people are getting down about it. The minute you give it a lick of paint and make sure that all those doors are on and you've got your fire warning systems on and your brake glass there, people feel safer and happier. New lighting, for example. Lack of quality materials. I mean, if anybody's manufacturing products that are sending out to customers, most customers want their products right price, right time, on time. They don't want a complaint. They want effectively pay for the goods that are quality goods. And if, for example, we're putting substandard materials in there, it might actually have an effect on the actual finished product itself. You might have a popular product, and because you've changed the materials, it becomes a product that nobody wants. So again, lack of quality materials may come into your spotting of non-conformances. Inappropriate work environment. I've covered some of those examples above. An issue on production and manufacturing line. Again, you might be getting a lot of rejects for a particular product. It might be that the actual machinery is not set up correctly. So by spotting it, by raising, again, non-conformances, at least it allows the supervisor or the manufacturing manager to understand, actually, we need to change the way that we're doing things. Late delivery or supplier issues. Well, supplier issues is self-explanatory. If you're not getting the raw materials that you need, you can't push products out to your clients and your customers. Late deliveries could exist on both sides. So suppliers sending you late deliveries, and you've got a production plan that you need to keep to. It costs a lot of money to keep a production plan up and running. And if they're not manufacturing, essentially, they're losing money. Late deliveries. I mean, as I said earlier, your customers want their products and services on time, at the agreed time that was there. And if it's late deliveries, some customers may get a bit unhappy about it, and then that might then lead to a customer complaint. Essentially, non-conformances, do not be afraid to spot them. Do not be afraid to communicate them. And as we move on to the next segment there, it's all about actually recording and reporting non-conformances. So reporting a non-conformance, there are various ways that organisations do this. You might have your own existing way. You might also have a simple non-conformance log that summarises all the non-conformances that you've raised. You may also have a detailed investigation report, often called a non-conformance report. Now, that non-conformance report generally looks at what the problem is, what happened, why it happened, perhaps who was involved, very much like an accident investigation, I might add. It's essentially getting down to the root cause of why that happened. And a non-conformance report acts as a footprint to say that we've identified a problem, this is what we've done about it, and then hopefully over a period of time, this is essentially how it's working for us. Now, once you've got that non-conformance report, and you may have implemented what actions that come out of that report, you may have implemented it and closed that non-conformance off. All well and good, but there's another thing that we also need to do. We need to keep his eye on it, because it could have been a big problem. And by keeping his eye on it, monitoring it, what we're doing is we're saying every month to start with, for an example, how is that training process going? Are we now, is everybody getting trained? Is the plan up to date? Chances are, if you have people looking at it and people understand that it's being monitored, people are going to essentially draw themselves in and help you to deliver the actual action itself. Now, I think what is interesting with a non-conformance report is, as I said earlier, it gives you a footprint. So at the beginning of the year, you might have had 1 or 2 issues that are very similar related. You might have raised 2 or 3 non-conformances, but at the end of January, you close them all out because you put something in place. Towards the back end of the year, when you have your management review, you could actually reflect on what non-conformances that you've had. And you can say, well, actually, yeah, we did have these issues at the beginning of the year, but we sorted it. Everybody's playing their part to prevent that from happening. Brilliant. That's working for us. What a non-conformance report also allows you to do is, if a couple of years passes and something happens and it's very similar to what happened a couple of years ago, you can always look and reference that report and say, what did we do 2 years ago? Right, we did that. Right, it means that we may have to communicate this a bit wider to remind everybody what to do. So you can actually use it as a way of correcting future problems, almost like a bit of a reference document. Generally speaking, the non-conformance report will identify certain things. As I said, the problem, if there's been any history of that, again, that's indicating a trend. Where and when did it occur? Because that might in itself be a trend. The area that it occurred in, it might have been that the accidents are occurring right at the start of the day, or particularly for shift workers, it might be at 6 o'clock in the morning, an hour before everybody's, they've done an 11-hour shift, they've got 1 more hour, and we have a spate of accidents. Well, generally, probably what that'll tell you is that people are getting tired at that point. So you might have to adjust your internal processes to accommodate perhaps not as much as activity in the last hour as we've done in the first 11 hours. How big the problem is. So again, you can make a judgment with your management team to say, is this a minor non-conformance? Can it be easily corrected? Or is it a bigger problem that, for example, requires us to work together as a team, get more resources in? It might be that you have to actually bring more resource in terms of people or more training. It might be that you need to invest in different equipment. How frequently is the non-conformance happening? Again, that lends itself to any trends that may be building up over a period of time, and how has it been measured? And that's one of the key points that I pointed out earlier. Once you've dealt with it, once you've tackled it, don't rest on your laurels with it. Just keep your eye on it and making sure whatever measures you've put in place is working, because you'll be in a better chance to correct it or fine-tune that process if it's not working fully as expected. Here we go. Corrective and preventative action. For anybody who's been working with management systems for a while, you will probably be already of the word corrective and preventative action. The principle behind it still exists within most modern management systems, but essentially what management systems really relate this area to is risks and opportunities as well. So again, I mean, the standards effectively got upgraded in sort of 2015 predominantly. So there was some initial word changes and things, but essentially it's about looking at the actions there that you need to carry out. And like I said, a consistent theme is we don't mind putting in corrective actions, and that's a very, very good part of creating improvement in the organisation. But the best part is essentially to prevent any firefighting, prevent any of those errors and omissions, going forward. I think some examples that are on screen there is it could be as part of your corrective and preventive action, stopping or rebooking an appointment or hosting a training session. As you can probably see on there, the point is, if we're spotting these things and we're reporting them internally and we're spotting them and we're dealing with them, generally before the product or service is being delivered to your customers or your clients, effectively you're actually going to have ironed out all the issues before it gets to it. Hence, you're not going to get any complaints, hopefully, fingers crossed. So when we're looking at non-conformances, as I've already indicated, root cause analysis. What is the root cause of why it's happening? If you as an organisation can identify what's gone wrong and actually identify the root cause of it, because the immediate problem might not necessarily be the full root cause. You might have to just say, well, Why did that happen? Okay, that's happened. Why did that happen? And effectively, it's almost like stepping backwards down the chain and actually identifying all the possible dominoes effectively that have fallen over that have created the problem. And once you get to your last domino, essentially that's where you're looking at. Get to the heart of the problem, fix it at the heart of the problem, and then all your dominoes can then effectively stand up on the back of that root cause analysis. So let's just look at some of the problem solving methods that organizations that may have. You may have individuals within your organization that are very good at investigating problems and helping to solve problems. You may have teams that are available to do that. Again, you might have a very good office team in there that work really well together, and they can work together to actually solve the problem for the organization rather than it just being one person. As the slide there does indicate, your problem solving, it can actually be any size, any size of team. It can, for a one person managed organization, or it could be split over a course of multiple departments. It may be that, for example, the production environment has a delivery yard, and it might be the yard team that deals with issues out in the yard, and they might do the fault finding on it. If it's a purchasing issue, it might be your purchasing manager and their team and the administration team that look at it. So I think looking at who can help you solve the problem, and generally including the people that's at the heart of those problems, the people that can spot it first, you're already onto a winner. So again, look at who you've got in your organization. Don't necessarily think because I'm a manager, I know absolutely everything. It might be that the materials for this product that I'm trying to send out to customers is absolutely not where it should be. And in those cases, it might be the guy that's on the mixer or the guy that's on the production line that's actually spotting it, and he can spot it, in real time and feed that back. Different people will have a different view of things, and I always find it interesting speaking to all levels of people within an organization, because it's interesting different people's takes. And it might be that your manager's got a lot of useful information, but it also might be interesting that your yard people, for example, people who manage the transport, they've got their part to play, and they've got a lot of interesting information that could help you solve your problem. I think respecting people's perspective on things, just because, for example, I might have only just joined the organization, doesn't necessarily mean that I don't know how, I don't know how offices work. It might be that I've got a background, in office management, and essentially I've got a lot to offer the organization. So consider including various people, as I say, particularly the people that are involved in delivering that product or service, or that particular procedure or activity within the service delivery activity. Cutting out complexity does help. If you can keep things simple, you can get to the root cause of things very, very quickly. Okay. Now, the example that you see on screen there, it's a very simple snapshot, a typical non-conformance. Now, your non-conformance log may look similar. It might have more columns on the end. It might be a full report. It's a one-side A4. Essentially, what we're trying to do there is reinforce some of the things that we've already spoken about. So identifying what the error is. Well, we've identified that it's our first non-conformance. We've got a date on there and when it was raised. We've got a description. We've got some error types on there for this particular non-conformance. Then we look at the reasons why it's happened. So that could be part of the investigation. Again, it can be a simple investigation. As long as you get into the root cause, some investigations might require a bit more information in there so that you can get a clear picture of why things have happened. And then what corrective actions have we done? So those are the simple steps, really. What's happened? Why has it happened? What are we doing about it? Your non-conformance logs or reports might, as I say, might have a couple of extra columns on there that say, have we closed it out? Is it open? Is it remaining on our radar? You might also have another column on there. What's the date that we're going to review it? So you might set yourself a frequent review period. It might be a weekly review. It might be a monthly review. It might be a 6-monthly review. I think the nature of the incident or the non-conformance will generally indicate how often you should be looking at it. So very serious issues, potential, obviously, risk to the business, reputation, even, risk to human health, that might be something that you keep your eye on more frequently. Whereas perhaps a document that may not have the correct version number, that might be just part of a check that your supervisor does as part of his ongoing activities. Again, it's up to you as an organisation to specify the review frequencies and also to what level of information that you're recording your non-conformances. But my view is the more information that you get in there, the more beneficial it is to you going forward, because you can always come back to it, read it, review it, see what you did for this particular instance and implement similar measures further down the line. So again, I mean, it doesn't have to be war and peace. It's literally, have we got a footprint of what we've done? And if it's a more serious issue, you may obviously go more in depth in terms of the investigation. So once you've created your non-conformance, once you've put in your corrective action, hopefully, most of us think, oh, brilliant, we've put in a corrective action there, it's going to work for us. But we don't rest on our laurels at that. What we do is as I said earlier, we just make sure that that corrective action is working for us. It might be working in its entirety, in which case, good, we can focus our attention on other areas of the business or the management system. If it's not working, if 90% of it's working and 10%'s not, at least you're in a position there to spot things and fine tune it so that it does get the 100% achievement that you actually want. When you're reviewing your non-conformance, you could look at your non-conformance report. You could compare it to what's going on in the business right there, right then. You could also compare the non-conformance report to accident statistics, complaints, errors. Effectively, there are various measures that you can use internally, statistics, figures, to actually confirm whether that action's been implemented. So I'll use the accident example there again. If you had a collection of accidents that continually happened before you did something, and that you might have had 10 accidents, at the end of the year, you could literally look at your accident stats and go, well, we've not had any other accidents since February. And after we implemented that, it stopped. So brilliant, definitely working for us, isn't it? As a result of reviewing all that, essentially, not only are you trying to find out if it's working, it might be that as a result of you implementing these further actions, it might help you to reduce, for example, the risks that are on your risk register or your risk assessments or your environmental aspects and impacts. So it's always worth revisiting your existing information of how you control your risks and your opportunities, because you may, as I say, it may actually decrease the overall level of risk, which can only be a good thing for your organisation. All right. So we've explored quite a lot of themes there. Now, one thing that the Citation ISO certification also offer, if anybody would like to explore management systems in more detail, non-conformances is only one component of obviously management system. On screen there are other components to management systems, and these are quite common across most management systems. But the ISO Mentor program offers a workshop program for anybody that wants to explore the elements of any management systems. It's particularly useful for people who are just starting out the journey of a management system, but also for organizations who perhaps have a management system and they want to give their staff a little bit more training and understanding of how to help them manage that management system. So the ISO Mentor program covers things like context of the organization, leadership, risks and opportunities, resource and competence, awareness and communication, design and development. The actual mentor program breaks these down into manageable chunks. So effectively what you can do, you can enroll your staff on these courses. They can sign up for the course, and the course it has a set roster. So you can see which dates fit with your employees, an hour a week or an hour a month. Effectively, you can drop onto these courses and actually cover all the elements of a management system. Now, on those courses, we cover the 45,001 standard, the 9,001 standard for quality, and also the 14,001 for environment. And again, what these courses will help organizations to do, it'll help them to get a wider understanding of management systems and how they're actually managed within organizations. Now, I think one of the other benefits is that's delivered by one of our consultants and experts who have a wealth of knowledge in not only sort of helping clients to implement management systems, but also looking at those management systems, monitoring those management systems, and also fine-tuning those management systems. There's a lot of practical elements to it, and you can also obviously engage with the person that's delivering that particular course that you've chosen to go on. There's a lot of, as I said, there are a lot of courses there, and there's a lot to explore, and it's a really, really, really good product. So if anybody would like to explore that further, please feel free to contact Citation ISO certification. I'll be putting some contact details on one of the slides, and I think my moderator has also kindly put some contact details in the chat as well. So do not be afraid to get in touch if you want to explore that further. I will be providing some useful links on the webinar slides. Some of the themes that we've discussed today, obviously you can explore those in detail. We have also got the Citation website there. There's lots of resources there. There's the Citation ISO certification website. That's got a lot of ISO related resources on there. All you've got to do is explore these. If you find the time to do it, please feel free to explore them. There's loads of goodies on there for everybody to digest in there. And finally, I would like to ask anybody or invite anybody for any questions on non-conformances or any general questions. If I'm obviously in a position to answer it, it is one of my favorite parts of the webinar. And I'm hoping that my moderator will furnish me with some questions. Right, brilliant. So Joseph, thank you for this question. Can you provide a guide for startups re 9001? Very little data to document at this stage, particularly an internal audit. So luckily enough, we have marketing material that will discuss the implementation of a 9001. It will break down your 9001, all the different components. What I will do for you there, Joseph, if my moderator has your email address, I will make sure that the moderator, can I say that it might not be before Easter, it might be after Easter there, but we can provide you certainly with some marketing materials for 9001. And again, if anybody wants any other marketing material that kind of answers the question there that Joseph, we do have the material there that will obviously explore 14,001 for the environment and also 45,001. And the very, very, very good leaflet, shall we say, although they're A4 in size, that I think that they're very, very well informed, and I think that'll give you what you need. A non-conformance, once open, how do you close it? Once evidence is obtained to support the statement required. Very good question there from Paul. So effectively, if you write up a non-conformance, whether it's in a summary log, an Excel worksheet, or whether you've got a non-conformance report, the first part, as you've identified, is registering that as a non-conformance. So that opens it. So what you do is when you've opened it, you actually document what you aim to do to close it out. So it might be that you have to train 5 members of staff on I don't know, fire extinguishers, and that might be the non-conformance. We've got no staff trained on, fire extinguishers. So essentially the non-conformance will stay open until those 5 members of staff have been trained. So if you book those 5 members of staff in, and next week they go on the course, they get the certificate, well, essentially the closeout on the non-conformance report, employee A, B, C, D, E, and F have been trained in fire extinguishers, training certificates on SharePoint. That's when you can close it out. The preventative action to that one, and I'm building on this one, is essentially ensure that training records are refreshed or reviewed, annually or every 2 years, depending on the actual training that you've identified for them. So you can close it out as soon as you've actually actioned it and you've got evidence to support that. I hope that answers your question. Samia, thank you very much for this question. Can we define a timeline to overcome a non-conformance, like a maximum or minimum time required? This is a brilliant question, actually. Yes, you can. As I identified earlier, non-conformances might be low level, or they might be, very, very serious red flag level. Now, I know from experience that some non-conformances, it's not as simply as just saying, right, we're going to do that, we'll do it, close it out. It might be that you need investment. It might be that you, for example, manufacturing environments that are all manual labor, it might be that in order to reduce accidents, we have to see about getting a capital expenditure for a robot machine that actually does all the manual work that employee did, so to prevent them from getting injury. Now, I know from experience there that robots and technology, it's not exactly cheap. So you might have to go through a process there where you set yourself a 3-month goal to do it. It might be sooner, or it might be even longer. I mean, the main thing is if you've got it on your radar and it requires a length of time to actually sort out and correct that non-conformance, if you plan it to exist over a period of time, that's perfectly fine. But obviously, you've just got to make sure that you're monitoring anything that's going on in between, because it could, for example, create more issues or problems. I mean, anybody as business owners, business managers, or people that are helping, obviously, businesses to succeed, you're the master of your own destiny. And in essence, it makes sense to try and deal with your non-conformance as quickly as possible. But you shouldn't be beating yourself with a stick, essentially, because you can't do it fast enough. If things are going to take time and you plan for that, that's all part of the management system. It's part of your planning activity. You might even set yourself an objective to say, right, in the next 3 months or 6 months, we are going to have X and Y and Z in place. And then obviously the senior managers can then work out what resources they need, what spend they need to do. So essentially, you can define that yourself, maximum or minimum time period. Yeah. Any more questions? Right. I have an open this is from Paul. Thank you, Paul. I have an open non-conformance and have data to close it. How do I close the outstanding non-conformance? Okay, then. So if you're using a non-conformance report or a log, essentially in the actions taken, just reflecting the actual log or the footprint that you've got for it, just confirm the evidence that you've got and confirm that you're happy with it. And if you're happy to close that out, you can essentially close it out, class it as, met, closed, completed. People have different language for doing different things, achieved, whatever language your business uses, keep it simple. This is what we've done. This is the action that we've taken. This is the evidence to support that action, closed. And it's as simple as that. And don't be afraid to close out those non-conformances. If you can do it as soon as you've done the action and you feel confident that it's not going to happen again, certainly just close it out and essentially just keep your eye on it then. Tracy, thank you for this one. Do any non-conformances need to be reported to the portal or internally in the business? So, in an interesting question there, different organisations will have different ways of reporting non-conformances. The portal that I think Tracy's on about, I think it's the Atlas portal. There are templates within that portal that allow you to identify, record, update, and close out non-conformance. So yes, you can do it in that portal. Other organisations, for example, they may have help desk tickets, and that help desk tickets might be a non-conformance that's how they process their non-conformance. Until that ticket's closed out, that non-conformance still stays active. Okay. Now, excuse me. My advice to anybody that's doing managing a management system, if you're raising non-conformances, it shouldn't be where you've just got that non-conformance for yourself and keep it. Not unless you're a one person operation, of course, because effectively you're managing it yourself. But the purpose of a non-conformance is raising awareness of things going wrong, raising awareness of things going wrong multiple times. And if you're not communicating that to the purchasing manager or the production manager or the business unit manager, they're not going to necessarily know what you need from them. So it might be you've raised 3 or 4 non-conformances, and this needs to be communicated to the business unit manager because we require additional resource. And those non-conformances may provide you with the justification to get that additional spend or that additional resource. Non-conformances for production or even office stuff, they need to be communicated to the teams that are actually helping you to deliver your products and services. Because if they're not aware of things going wrong, they could be potentially thinking, oh, I'm doing a great job here. You know, I'm doing all my work and you know, I'm getting all this business put through, but it might be that Robert here is making an absolute mess of things and is creating more work further down the line. If you come and have a word with me and say, Rob, you're just not completing that checkbox on the system, or you're not making sure that a name's been added to the approver on that. Essentially, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get people to do the job properly so that it's not creating your management team problems further down the line. So I think it's a bit of both, isn't it? You've got to record them yourselves, but you've also got to communicate them across relevant areas of the team, because people want to know if things are going wrong, because people like to get things done to prevent them from happening again. Thanks, Tracy, for that one. And I hope I've said that correctly. I apologise if I haven't, but thanks for your question. Is every complaint by a customer a non-conformance? This is again a good question. So you yourself can clarify whether it's a serious complaint or a minor complaint. And one thing that I will say is human nature is human nature. Some people may have what they consider to be a complaint, but actually it's just something little that has happened. It's not caused a massive impact. They might have got the delivery a day late. Now, it might have been beyond your control, and that might have happened only once in the last 12 months. Is that worthy of a non-conformance? Probably not, because it happens very, very infrequently. Plus, it's a very, very minor complaint. Now, if somebody's been charged excessive amounts of money for something that they didn't receive and they've complained about it, then potentially something's fallen down in your office processes. For example, your invoice may have been released to that client without necessarily confirming that the invoice is correct, or they've received the products that's stated on the invoice. So again, I think you've got to make a judgment of what are your serious complaints, and is it a complaint? Look at the history of your complaints as well and think, is this a common theme? So in fact, this is a nice lead into one of the things that I don't think that I touched on. You may have a very low level complaint from a customer. It might be a late delivery, okay? And you might be using a delivery service to do that. I won't name any of the mainstream ones, but essentially you might have a parcel delivery that's a day late. Now, if over the next 3 months that parcel deliverer is consistently just not delivering on the dates that they should be, what you're getting is you're getting very low level complaints, but it's building up a trend. Collectively, that trend could actually be recorded as a major non-conformance, because that particular parcel deliverer is always a day late. And there might be reasons behind it, but without a non-conformance, you can't essentially investigate. You can't go back. Well, you can go back to the supplier, but your non-conformance is a way of saying to the supplier, look, you've created this amount of instances and complaints within our business. It all relates to late deliveries. What are you going to do about it? Because essentially it's out of our hands, but it's, our complaints are a result of your service delivery. So you can use the non-conformance to actually drive the improvement and actually make the parcel delivery really sort of up the game, really, more than anything else. Really just establish there, is it a massive risk to your business? Is it a customer again that's, for example, it might be 90% of your business is solely the business that you do is with that customer. So you're going to treat that customer with utmost urgency. And it might be that every complaint to that high level customer needs to be considered a non-conformance, because if that customer goes, well, that's 90% of your revenue not coming into the business. I hope that's answered your question. Samo, thanks very much for this one. Is there a point where it would be considered too small or insignificant to report? Again, another good question. So it might be a total random thing that's come up and you've never spotted it before. And for example, it might be just going having a word with Robert and saying, Robert, you're not clicking your button on there, or Robert, we need you to wear your high-vis vest while you're in there. And, you know, the next day, the manager looks at Robert and Robert's wearing his high-vis vest and everybody else is wearing the high-vis vest. You could report it as a non-conformance depending on how serious you see that it is. What I would generally say is if you've checked something on your management system and people aren't following it, generally it's worthy of a non-conformance. It'd be interesting to find out, Samo, what small or insignificant means to you and your organisation. When I was in implementing management systems, if it was just something that I'd spotted and there wasn't, I knew there wasn't a wider issue and it were worthy of just going up and having a chat, you know, tapping somebody on the shoulder and saying, just be mindful, you need to put this jacket on, or you need to wear your high vis, or you need to wear your boots while you're out in the yard. I would just have a word and see how it goes. If, for example, all my drivers were out and none of them were, you know, they were wearing flip-flops or trainers, I would be raising it as a non-conformance, even if generally I'd kind of seen it twice. You know, if I see things repeating itself, it's a good indication that you're potentially risking something more serious happening. Even though something might not have happened, it's the potential to sort of see things happening there. Will a long list of non-conformances affect the QMS audit rating of an organisation? Haha. So it's not about what happens, it's more about what you do when things happen. Okay. So if I've engaged with many companies. Some companies have very, very few non-conformances. Some companies have many, many non-conformances, particularly like high volume manufacturing industries where there's the more potential to go wrong. Now, if I go into an organisation and I see 47 non-conformances, yes, it does seem quite a lot. But what I'd do is I'd have a look at it. And first of all, I'm looking, is the organisation closing these out? Because that's the ultimate thing, isn't it? You want to create action. If there's evidence that they are closing it out, brilliant. That's one thing that I'm happy about. One other thing I'll look at is I'll look at the 47 non-conformances and I'll go, right, when did these non-conformances start? Is there any non-conformances that are very similar in nature? And I'll look at the frequencies between. And if I see a pattern there, you know, from the beginning of January right up to July, you know, every single week we've got this and happening, and all the non-conformances are the same. Now, what I would say to the client is, you have obviously identifying your non-conformances, you're closing it out, but what you're not doing is you're perhaps not implementing effective measures to prevent further instances, and that's about the preventative action. So again, what I would generally do is, as an implementer of an ISO, I would look at if there are any trends. If things go on as a non-conformance, just look at how quick they're actually being reported, and look, is this a repeat of what happened yesterday? Is this a repeat of what happened last week? And once I get 3 hits the same, essentially that's effectively where I'm looking and thinking, perhaps we need to get in together in a room and find a solution to this, because if it carries on, you're going to have to action and potentially look at and investigate this happening week after week. And it seems ludicrous, doesn't it, that you're not effectively closing it out at source. You're not understanding what the root cause is, because once you do understand the root cause and you put that corrective action in place, absolutely brilliant. You're not going to get these things happening week after week after week. Paul, thank you for this one. We are a very rapidly expanding business and in a transition state involving rapid change, which, to be fair, is in a lot of organisations at the moment. As a result of most of our documents are having to be rewritten to reflect where we are now. Brilliant. That makes me smile. The standards we have today are 14,001, 9,001 and 45,001. These were created for a much smaller operation, so we are still in transition. Is there any allowance during your audit for this process which may not be completed before the audit's due? I love this question, Paul. Thanks ever so much for putting it in there. Okay. So the quick answer is, right, I think part of a management system, Paul, is allowing you to plan what your destiny is going to be. Okay, so my advice for you for this one is, first of all, there are certain things that you probably need to do. So think about your objectives register or your objectives, and make sure that that's included as an objective to complete with a time frame and people attached to it. So there'll be people responsible for it. Another thing that you could do when you have your management review, you could reflect in your management review that that's what your intentions are. So part of the transition, we're updating. The point is with this, Paul, if you've got a plan and we can see that you've got a plan, you're managing it. What we would do is the following year, we would look at your plan and make sure that you follow that plan. And hopefully, but obviously by the next year, you'll have put in all the bits and pieces that you needed to do. Now, one thing that I will say is, although your new business might not fully reflect the old business, a lot of the provisions that are already in your 40,001, 9,001, 45,001, a lot of those provisions will still be relevant. It might not be completely relevant, but a lot of them will still be relevant. So we do understand that businesses have crossover periods, but for example, most businesses need customer orders. They need acknowledgement of them orders. They need, for example, to send out invoices. Now, whether you're in transition or not, we'd probably still be able to evidence some of that while you're doing your transition. Where it may come up, it might be under the document management or document control. So effectively, it might say in your management system that you have internal procedures that are kept up to date. Well, again, when we're auditing you, we can reflect the fact that your organisation is in the process of updating these procedures. There's a plan via their objective register in place, and the client set themselves, 5 procedures a week to do. We're now currently on week 3. The client's completed 15 of their procedures. There's another 20 procedures to go. So there's always ways that we can look and evidence things in there, Paul, as long as you've documented what your plan is, what your intentions are, often through your management review and your objectives register. That will effectively allow us to understand where you are as a business and that transition's taking place. And Paul, there's always that conversation that you have with the auditor. So again, you can sort of explain this to the auditor in attendance. I'm hoping that's answered your question. Certainly feel free to get back to me on that if you've got any further questions, Paul. But yeah, that very good question, that one. I like that one. What are the best CAPA KPIs? Thanks, Gary, for this one. So corrective actions and obviously corrective actions and preventative action KPIs. I mean, essentially what the KPIs, and I'm going to take this really down to the most basic there. How many non-conformances have you raised? What is I suppose you could say, have you raised that many it's caused a trigger point? So you might have an objective, for example, to keep your non-conformances down as much as possible, no more than 20 a year, for example. I mean, different businesses require different things, and that might not be realistic, but you can set what level that effectively it gets to before it raises a full alarm bell to the senior management team or the shareholders, for example. You could put a performance indicator in there. How long has it been since raising it to closing it out? So a KPI in there. We aim to complete all our corrective actions within 1 month of it being raised. So you can see through your non-conformances as it escalated over a month. Generally, what you're really looking on there is how many we've raised. Has there been any excessive trends? Is there a particular department that really needs to come to the party and understand the reason why you're doing it so that they can help reduce that over a period of time? And again, how you monitor and measurement that, you could just monitor and measurement on the amount of non-conformances raised to the amount closed out. That's a very, very sort of simple one. Feel free to ask any more on there. Samo, thanks again for the follow-up on that one. Something like ordering a box of 20 tins of paint and only nine arriving. Is this reportable or considered too minor? Right. So I think you may raise it as a non-conformance, and again, it might not stop you from being able to distribute that paint, but what you need to be aware of, you're paying for 20 tins of paint and only 19 arriving. So if it is raised as a formal non-conformance and you write it in a report, guess what I'd do? I'd send that report to the supplier and I'd say, do you realise that you're sending us pallets with only 19 and we're paying for 20? Can you make sure that this is corrected? Because I know how this works. If I was that supplier, that non-conformance, it'll probably go to a manager or a supervisor. Do we think that that supervisor or manager wants to be receiving any sort of bad feedback or anything? So if our company has been in touch, what that supervisor is going to do is next time that those 20 tins go out on a pallet, it might be that the supervisor says to Jonathan, now, you know, who's delivered it, Jonathan, make sure that those paint tins, there's 20 on there. I want you to double check it. You know, effectively, that means that your non-conformance is working. And what you can do is, if you send that non-conformance report to your supplier, you can say to them, we want you to provide a response to this and put in what you're doing about it. So that when they do reply to you, you can clearly see what they're doing about it. And they might say, we are checking it. All your dispatches are being checked by our delivery driver, every single one. And, you know, and it's being double checked to ensure that you're getting 20 tins. So believe it or not, I do think that's worthy raising of a non-conformance, because ultimately, over a course of the year, if you're ordering 20 tins a day or 20 tins a week, you know, you're gonna lose out on 52 tins per year, which, you know, I mean, I know different paints are quite expensive. Military paint, for example, is very, very expensive. So you know, a tin of paint at your favourite hardware store might only cost you £5, but for military paint, it might be that it's 200 quid a tin. So again, it's a massive impact, isn't it? You're spending money and hemorrhaging money where you don't really need to. So yes, I would consider that as a non-conformance. It might only be a minor non-conformance, as I say, because it's not affected your ability to deliver the tins while they send you this extra tin. And the next delivery, it's obviously going to hopefully contain 20 tins, and everyone after that is going to be 20 tins. What is KPIs? Brilliant. KPIs is a short term for key performance indicator. And what a key performance indicator is essentially a measurement tool that management and business use to see whether their business processes are performing as they should. So, for example, it might be one of your internal KPIs might be, we aim to reduce customer complaints by 50% by the end of 2023. That's a KPI. You can measure it. You can effectively keep a check on it throughout the year. And when you get to the end of the year, you can compare it against last year's complaints and see whether you did achieve that 50% reduction. It might be that you intend on improving the quality of a product or, you know, customer satisfaction by 30%. And that might involve you sending out more customer satisfaction surveys to your customers. And by doing that, it's going to allow you to measure the KPI that you've set. I mean, there are various business KPIs that you can put KPIs for service delivery. You can put KPIs for how many times somebody's answered the telephone and how quick they answered that calls. So a KPI for that might be, we aim to respond to our customer calls within 30 seconds of that customer phoning us up. That could be a KPI. And your telephone system might allow you to produce a report that shows you that we had 100 customers phone us on Monday. Each one of those calls was handled by one of our call handlers within 10 seconds. That means that you've actually achieved better than what your KPI set. But again, it's a measurement by which you're setting yourself, so at least you've got something to aim for and measure against. And again, if you achieve it easily, it might be that you then reduce the number or increase the number. And you know, for example, this year we're aiming at 30% increase in customer satisfaction. We did really well. We achieved 40%. So next year I'm setting a KPI for 50% customer satisfaction. Steve, thank you. We had an audit and had an NC raised against secure areas in our premises, but we are a home cloud-based company. Does this become non-applicable? Interesting question. I mean, without the history behind this, excuse me, I wouldn't be able to comment fully, but let me just give you some follow-up to this. Okay, so NC against secure areas. I'm guessing, Steve, it's probably a 27001 audit that you had, and there is an element in there that talks about secure area and premises. Now, again, without the history and seeing the report, it could be that, for example, that you're not in the office. However, people working from home, people working from their home office, or it might even be somebody working from the front room where they've got the screen facing towards the window, but your company doesn't know about it. And that might have come across in the actual audit itself. I mean, essentially, that would indicate why an NT was raised, because either there's a risk to the information that's on screen or on a desk. I mean, a good one for me is I work from home, but I have small children. Now, I do my utmost to, obviously, I don't let my children press my keyboard and things, but that's one consideration of homeworking, isn't it? I wouldn't want my kids to be able to come on and tap my keyboard when I've got information on the screen there. And I certainly wouldn't want them messing with my notepad, because they do love to draw with pens, crayons and pencils. So what I tend to do is I keep my work area away, obviously, from the kids, and essentially I don't generally let my kids, for example, have access to my computer. And I keep that separate as much as I can. I certainly won't work with my screen facing a window. You know, some people do work with the back towards the window with the screen facing them, which means somebody at a bus stop can be looking in and going, oh, look at all them lovely patient information there, which they shouldn't be able to see. It'd be interesting to know, Steve, what the actual issue on that one in more detail, but, and I could essentially give you a definitive answer on that one. If it's to do with your office environment where nobody is, then essentially there shouldn't really be a non-conformance to answer to. However, if you are frequenting that office, even if it's only twice a year, there might be a consideration there that you actually have to consider going forward. And I do know from the 27,001, I think there's about there's over 9 or 10 sort of criteria within sort of premises security. So that particular aspect that we're looking at there, it could be quite wide ranging, from clear desk to how rooms are locked and stuff. You know, how you keep your screen safe from prying kids or meddling kids like mine. Okay, any more questions? Hey, are you sure nobody wants to answer ask any more questions? I'm here. We're on a roll. We've actually answered quite a lot. It's got to be a record as that. I think my moderator will be chuckling to herself for that one. Well, if nobody's got any more questions, I'd just like to thank everybody for attending the webinar, for staying on the webinar. Just to let everybody know, the slides that you actually have seen during this presentation, my moderator will be ensuring that everybody that's attended will be getting a copy of those slides. So if you do want to recap on any of those, they will be sent out to you via email. I do think as well, after Easter, I'm going to say after Easter now, because we're quite close to that Easter break, but there'll be a copy of the webinar itself also available online that my moderator will post on there. So if you want your other members of your team to have a look at that, or to have a quick look through the webinar, or even focus on some of the topics that we've covered, there'll be a version of that webinar available on there, so you'll be able to sort of watch this back if you need to. And again, there's some contact points in the chat that if you want to obviously contact the marketing team, if you want to discuss any of the ISO mentor stuff, if you want to obviously look and explore that, all you need to do is get in touch. We've got an expert team behind us, and we'll do our utmost to help obviously anybody that requires it. And also, I'm going to request from my moderator for the 9014 and 45 material to probably be issued alongside any communications that go out, because I know that it would be useful for anybody, and it's certainly a very good lead into a management system for anybody that's not currently operating a management system, or certainly even thinking about one. That will help you to almost demystify a lot of the areas that you will traditionally be involved with when implementing a management system. If you do have any further questions after the webinar, feel free to get in touch with marketing@qmsuk.com. And I think, let me just have a look at the chat there. Sorry, just bear with me. Yeah, I think my moderator put some links in there for you. So as I said, they've got some links in there. Listen, much appreciate for everybody staying. I wish you all have a happy Easter. and hope that you all found some benefit from it. Feel free to get in touch if you need to, and hopefully keep your eye out for more webinars, because we do lots of stuff like this. I'd love to see you all on future webinars that look at different areas and aspects of management systems. Thanks ever so much for attending, folks. Enjoy your Easter. All the best. Bye-bye.